So we got a 2014 Chrysler Town & Country 3.6 Pentastar motor, and we've got oil traces across the driveway, and they appear to be coming from the driver's side of the car, and telltale signs that you probably need one of these guys. And this is an oil filter housing along with an oil cooler that sits down in the valley of the engine. The problem is that this will develop leaks, and the only place for the oil to go is to roll down the valley over the bell housing of the transmission, down the backside of the transmission, and then so you'll see drip drip in the driveway somewhere near driver's side center of the vehicle. So we're going to be digging down in here and taking a look at that. We'll pull a couple covers off, and in a second, after we get these covers off, we'll get a better look at the oil trace that's leading us back to this part. All right, so we've got the engine cover off, and we're looking down in here at the top of the transmission right now. And what you're going to notice is we got puddles of engine oil laying in here on top of the transmission. It's not transmission fluid. We've got trans cooler lines coming out of the trans right here, but we're looking at engine oil. It's pretty black and dark in color, not light red like it would be leaking out of here. And it's hard to see, but if you look up the bell housing into the valley back here, so here's the valley. There's just a lot of oil and traces of oil that have run down the bell housing right here. Now there's no oil on the sides of the heads. They're completely dry, and that oil's been working its way down out of the valley. So we're going to work on getting the upper intake off first and getting down to our oil filter oil cooler housing.
So we'll take a look at the 4 nuts that I'm taking off right now. Just removed one that is right here on the front of the manifold. There are 2. There's another one down here. And then there's 2 back here. One right here and another right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 10 millimeter nuts on 6x1 threads. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. So, in addition to these 2 10s, there's a 13 millimeter that holds that back plate on. So, this plate, when you take that 13 mil out, that loosens it up because of the 2 studs on the front of the manifold. One here, one here. The manifold has to get lifted up in the back first and then slid out of the studs. And this is our upper manifold, and we're looking at plenum gaskets right now. And first thing I'm going to do is get some rags and stick them down in those holes just to make sure that we don't accidentally drop anything, get any dirt, anything down in those intake runners.
All right, oil cooler's out of here. First time I'm doing this job too, so if you didn't catch my advice in my chipmunk voice in the high speed segments, here's what I learned my first time doing this. After you lift the oil cooler up out of this mucky mess called the valley, what you're going to notice is the dirtiest, nastiest part is right here on this front edge of the motor, because there's an opening, so any leaf or dust or dirt that blew around in here settled in the valley. Well, there was oil in there to catch all that junk right in this area. You have two coolant passages here, what I believe is an oil return right here. Now, my suggestion, and I made this mistake, when you start to dig the muck up out of here and grabbing the leaves and stuff, go ahead and push some rags down in all those openings so you don't have to fish them back up out of there later. Now, if you remember what this looked like, I probably pulled about a quart and a half, almost 2 quarts of oil out of this valley. And, you know, one option is you burn up, you know, a box of rags trying to absorb the oil. Another option is with a shop vac and some heater hose down a transcooler hose. I took my shop vac and I was able to suck most of the crud, the junk, up out of that hole. And that got me, I think, lowered the oil level. Now I can clean these openings up and make sure that everything's prepped and ready for my new oil cooler to go back on. I did unplug both knock sensors to get the tube down in there and clean as much out as I can. Another interesting thing, and I struggled with ignition coil and fuel injector connectors. There's no safety lock on the coil connectors. So here's a coil connector right here. All it is, you know, a push lock, but we all know as plastic gets brittle and older, it's harder to work these push lock connectors. Pushing them in while you try to release was helpful. Push in, push down on the lock, and then pull out. The fuel injectors do have a lock. That's what this red clip is right here. So you're going to need to pry the red clip up before you can press on the release for the connector. Now, there's nothing to disengage the lock. The lock is going to come in and lock that release in, so you can't press on the release. And all I had to do to see if I can, the lock does not want to push down unless that's down inside, but all I had to do is take a hose hook and dig it in underneath this red and then just pry up. I don't want to say gently, but not forcefully either, because we all know, this is a 14, give these plastic red clips a couple years and then they just explode when we try and pry on them with anything. But hose hook underneath, a little bit more than gentle pry up, and they popped up and I was able to get all the locks to release. Then we got an oil pressure sensor, and a coolant temp sensor hanging out here in the oil cooler housing. And then just a tip on this, I was surprised to find the coolant temp sensor really difficult to back off. Well, when you're trying to break that loose, instead of holding it down on the bench like I did the first time, turn it upside down, put it in a vise. Don't be surprised when you find that this coolant temp sensor is pretty tight, but it did come out. And that's all I got. I got a lower intake out, an upper intake out, air intake assembly. We're down in the valley now. We've got all the oil and the muck sucked out, and now the less exciting part of just cleaning things really good, prepping them for our new oil cooler, our new lower manifold gaskets, and we're going back together. So part 2 of this video, we'll have it cleaned up. I'll go over torque specifications and the install. Thank you.